And one. Well, welcome to the latest edition of On Point. We were kind of on a hiatus for a week or so. Our producer, Liz Black, was taking a well-deserved vacation. And of course, a lot has happened since then. I mean, almost every day with this election and Trump, things are going on here. But the bottom line is we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to try to condense it into at least 15 minutes or so. We had the October surprise in 2016 where Comey came out and basically, I think he derailed Hillary Clinton's election to president. But now we have the September surprise, something that I think dwarfs the Nixon tapes. Bob Woodward, who has been following presidents for time immemorial, has come out with a new book called Rage. The book itself is salacious and full of all sorts of details on Trump, but books have come out all along. We've had Michael Cohen, Mary Trump et al., but it's the tapes. My goodness. You would think that with these tapes and what Trump is saying on these tapes about the pandemic, knowing about this, I think back in January, February, the lies that have come out, and people hearing these tapes, it would make a difference. Has it? Well, let's talk about that. We're going to bring in, of course, political analyst and best-selling author Eric Ham. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Eric, welcome to the show. And my goodness, these tapes, Trump, in his own words, talking about the pandemic, he knew it would be a killer. The latest thing that Woodward came out with, I think, yesterday, is that he was at some meeting and somebody sneezed. He says, I ran out of the room because, I mean, but here's the deal. There are still people, despite the tapes, that are behind this guy. Look at these rallies he's had recently. People are packed in there, majority of people with no mask. What in the heck is going on?
It's Trump unplugged, but this is what you expect from the base. Look, President Donald Trump, since coming down that gilded staircase, has been courting a base of voters, and those voters have been with him. They have not left him, and they're not going to leave him no matter how bad things get. That's what's keeping him in this race. That's what's making the race competitive, particularly in many of these battleground states. But it's also why Trump has reached a ceiling of around 40% or so, and why he can't get above that, because he has not moved beyond his base. And this race is going to be very different from 2016 in that they're not going to be candidates on the far right or the far left. It's just Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and somebody's got to get to 50%. Donald Trump didn't get there in 2016. I don't think he'll get there in 2020, but yes, his base will be with him no matter how bad the tapes are, no matter how bad it gets. In politics, there's don't get caught with a live girl or a dead boy. Donald Trump has busted through all of those norms, and it doesn't matter. His base simply isn't going anywhere.
Well, look, and we know that, but I guess my thing is I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I'm still scratching my head because basically what he's saying to his base, okay, I'm going to screw you and you're going to like it. And, you talk about the veterans that are behind this man, people that are attending these rallies. He's already said this is a killer. They're still there. They just don't seem to care. I mean, what Kool-Aid have they been drinking? What kind of hypnotic effect does this guy have on these people? He's basically saying, I don't care about you. You're garbage, but you're going to like me anyway. I don't get it, Eric. I don't get it.
Well, many people who are not bought into the Trump phenomenon, like those that are following him, simply do not get it as well. I mean, look, there was a signing agreement that took place at the White House yesterday on the White House lawn. You had nearly 700 people that were in attendance of that, not many of them wearing masks at all. And one of those groups that were there was a cadre of Israelis. Israel is actually implementing its second lockdown as a result of the coronavirus. In fact, we were told that it was only those who were part of the Israeli delegation that were wearing masks. So there are people who just don't see this. And Trump has, pushed that narrative again to his supporters. and they're buying it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh yeah, lying out of his teeth about Winston Churchill, what he said or allegedly said from the top of buildings during the bombing of London. I mean, just out and out lies. He even came out and said on tape that also got me. He says, "Look, I'm not really worried about these rallies because I'm distant so much from these people." I'm saying to myself, "Okay, you're saying that, and people are hearing this." And that, I don't know. Let's move on in the sense that there are a couple things I want to talk about the Latino vote and also how blacks are responding. I didn't get a chance to see it last night with 50 days out or so out of the election. He's on ABC with George Stephanopoulos, and there were a number of black people that confronted him and had a number of questions. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and we saw that this is the first time we saw President Donald Trump really outside the presidential political bubble. A lot of times the president is really speaking to his base. And last night he was in Philadelphia for this town hall where he was speaking directly to voters. And we saw the president get pushed like we've never seen before, frankly. We've never seen even a cadre of journalists actually push the president the way many of these voters did. There was a young lady who actually referenced the Bob Woodward book saying, you downplayed this virus. And she asked, why did he do so? And he actually responded saying he upplayed the virus, which simply isn't true. We saw an African-American man who really pushed him on this whole idea of make America great again, and also pushing on systemic racism. The president went on to say that he just did not see it, and then said he didn't see it for him. So again, this was a moment where the president simply could not, reach beyond himself. One of the key components of being president and commander in chief is, there are a lot of commander in labels that you wear. There's commander in chief, there's consoler in chief, but there's also empathizer in chief. And what we saw last night was, again, a president who is simply incapable of seeing anything that simply does not impact him, does not revolve around him. And I think that was crystal clear in the number of the questions that we saw last night. But also, Julian, very quickly, I'll just add this. This was clearly not just an indictment of the president. It was an indictment of the entire media landscape that you had, quote unquote, laymen who pressed the president, who pushed the president on key issues in a way that we have not seen journalists do in the time that the president's been in office.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because we've talked about this ad nauseum, specifically the White House press corps and their ability to follow up with pertinent questions. Basically, giving the president a free pass, not interrupting him, nothing like that. And again, you have people that are not journalists that can ask hard-hitting questions and throw it to this guy that the journalist can't. Like, I don't know where the state of journalism is these days. I mean, outside of somebody like Bob Woodward, he's an older man now. Who's going to replace him? Who is out there to take up the mantelpiece, when some of the journalists of past that we know, or that are still present but are getting older, pass away?
Julian, we don't know. But what we saw last night certainly gave hope to this idea that there is an informed and engaged electorate. And again, it goes back to because the people that we saw press Donald Trump last night were two African-American women, one African-American man. And we know that it is those African-American women specifically who are really pushing at least the Democratic Party, pressing, for a certainly more engaged party and more engaged politicians. And we're seeing that play out. And now I think the question becomes, how is this media landscape going to respond? Also, how are politicians going to respond? We're seeing Joe Biden actually move more by trying to reach out to the African-American community. You talked about the Latino community. We saw the former vice president in Kissimmee, Florida yesterday. And I think what we're seeing there, particularly in that Orange County area that encompasses Orlando, you've got a large growing population of both Latinos and African Americans. Also, it's important to note that that's an area where you've got congressional Democrats led by current Congresswoman and former Orlando Chief of Police Val Demings, who will certainly be pressing the button for Joe Biden. but this is going to be a race where you could see areas where you've got turnout of African Americans that Hillary Clinton did not have in 2016. If Biden can boost his numbers with the African American vote, of course they need to get the turnout in Broward County and South Florida. But if you got an area like Orange County where you can grow that voter base to actually come out, I think that could be the difference in the race. And I'll say this very quickly. Joe Biden's got to do more with Kamala Harris. He's got to get her really engaged with that Haitian and Jamaican population in South Florida. In 2016, the Haitian community was a little, they weren't as engaged with the Clinton camp. And so Kamala Harris can be Joe Biden's voice, can be his ticket to actually motivate those voters. When people talk about Trump not doing well with with Biden not doing well with Latinos in South Florida, what they're speaking about are Cuban American voters. And let's be frank, those voters have gone Republican for decades. They're not switching over to Joe Biden. But where Joe Biden can neutralize that support of Donald Trump is with that Jamaican and Haitian community. And now he's got someone on the ticket who can go directly at that community. The question is, how willing are they to actually go after them and really bring those voters in?
Well, look, the Democrats have no excuse. We already know now that Michael Bloomberg has pledged $100 million to deal with what's going on down there in the state of Florida. So they have the money behind them for ads, boots on the ground and all that stuff. They just have to do it. My main concern, though, Eric, is that the Democrats, I don't know. They still don't know how to fight. You put them in a back alley brawl, and you have a president now that's saying, okay, look, I'm now going to be vicious, because of some ad that Joe Biden put out. So you know what he's going to do. I mean, he was vicious before. And I'm just wondering if they really have the teeth, the metal to deal with this president. I'm not convinced.
I mean, no, and we've seen those reservations from a number of Democrats based on what's taking place. But what we saw from Joe Biden this week shows that he's really he's willing to throw a punch, and he's willing to throw a punch to put Donald Trump on his back heels. He gave a speech in Delaware on Monday where he said, do you want the arsonist in chief for another 4 years? Basically pushing at him the same argument that we've seen Donald Trump push on Joe Biden, suggesting that somehow everything that we're seeing take place in this country right now is Joe Biden's fault. And so now what we're seeing is Biden is willing to throw that punch at him. And I think, we've got the debates that are going to be taking place just the week after next. And after what we saw last night, with clearly Donald Trump isn't ready to really handle the questions, the firepower that will come at him, basically throwing the same talking points that his base laps up. You gotta think that Joe Biden is ready to match and meet Donald Trump head on. And I think that could be crucial. And even a number of people who are sitting on the sidelines right now to move one way or the other. So I think you're going to see a Biden who's ready to spar, who's ready to fight. And I think you're going to see a reeling and defense of Donald Trump.
Okay, we might call this a rope-a-dope. We can use that expression. Look, I made a prediction about the vice presidential nominee. I was right about that, and I believe deep in my heart I'm going to be right about this. They talk about Sleepy Joe. I think that Joe Biden is going to tear Donald Trump up because he has so much ammunition. I wish he could come up to that podium there just with a tape recorder and just play it. And just play his words. I mean, if he could get away with doing that and just putting that microphone up, I mean, it's over as far as I'm concerned. That being said, and I believe this is going to be the tipping scale, two things. One, before we close here, do you think that Black people will come out to vote in droves like they did not in 2016? And do you think that this election will be close? I'm thinking that it's not going to be as close as some of the polls may predict. I think that that this, maybe not a landslide, but I do think that a lot of people are going to vote their conscience on this, and it won't be as close as the polls say. What do you think on both those two issues?
Right. Starting with the African American vote, yes, I do believe we're going to see those numbers improve on 2016. And we have 2018 as our guide for that. In fact, if you just look at where I talked about earlier in Orange County, Florida, the area that encompasses Orlando, we've seen huge turnouts already. And so I think 2018 is already our guide for what we're going to see, record turnouts, including the African American community. As far as the race in terms of the closeness or not, if in fact those turnouts are what they were in 2016 and 2018, I don't know about the closeness or the margins of victory, but Joe Biden should be able to hold serve if he continues. And then, of course, that $100 million that Bloomberg is throwing in Florida, that could be a game changer, because here's what's key about that money. It's not just that it's $100 million. It's that Michael Bloomberg knows how to micro target better than anyone in the business. And he's not just throwing $100 million out there. He's going to uncover every rock, every crevice, every shadow, and get out the people that Joe Biden needs to win Florida. So that could be the ball game right there.
All right, well, let's see. We've got a lot to look forward to. It's exciting, it's scary, it's nail-biting, and all those things. But of course, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about next week as the election continues to unfold. Eric Ham, as always, my friend, thank you so much.
All right, my man.
Well, here we are about 50 days to the election, and we have a damning book on Donald Trump. Perhaps the most prolific book that really details the working mind of this man, by Bob Woodward. And the book is complemented more so and strengthened and fortified by the tapes, the almighty tapes. What will this mean for the folks, the diehards that have been backing Trump? Will they break? Will these tapes make a difference? Perhaps, perhaps not. But more importantly, will Americans come together, those who are in the majority, not the 36 of the 40% of the Trumpers, the Trumpeteers or the Trumpaholics, but will Americans galvanize, even if they don't particularly like everything about Joe Biden or Kamala Harris? We seem to understand and believe that our democracy is at stake here with this man. And as I've said before, democracy is not, repeat, not a spectator sport. We've got to get involved. We've got to vote. But even more importantly, keeping people on point, as I've always said, and I've stressed this, voting is just the beginning. Once we vote a candidate in or candidates in, we have to keep on them. We got to get involved with our town halls. Politics is local on the local level. So democracy is not a spectator sport. And if we want it to work, we have to get involved. We can't leave it up to the politicians or somebody else. This is an ongoing thing, and that's what makes democracy great. But it's only great if we get involved. A lot to look forward to, and we're going to keep you on point as we move forward to November 3rd and beyond. Thanks for joining us this week on Point, and we'll see you again next week.